The Rebel Capitalist Show.
I was just listening to your recent conversation with our good buddy Eric Townsend, where you were talking about the supply and demand dynamics of what you see going into the fourth quarter. And one thing I'd love for you to expand on is the difference between the price of gas or the gas usage and then diesel and jet fuel, and how that translates into what the real economy is actually doing, if it's doing well or if it's really suffering.
Sure. So nobody that I know actually consumes crude oil. I mean, we hear guys talk about it all the time, but I've never owned a barrel of crude oil in my life and don't have any intention to. I use, and you use, and all of your listeners, they use gasoline and kerosene and diesel and all the stuff that's refined from a barrel of oil. And so the largest volumetric product of oil, refined product, is gasoline. Okay, I mean that's very straightforward, and so the problem with gasoline, using gasoline as a measure. Okay, so if we're back to, let's just say, 85% of gasoline consumption compared to where we were before COVID, closed our economy, then most people would say, well, it's not great, but, we're only 15% below where we were before, so we're doing pretty well. And the problem with that is that gasoline is something you need to play, but not to win. So in other words, if you're not selling gasoline, it sucks. But gasoline doesn't produce a lot of economic activity. I mean, when I get in my car and drive around and visit friends and, spend $15 at Home Depot or something, that doesn't add a lot to the economy. Diesel, or distillate as its official name is, that's what runs the economy. That's the barometer of the economy. Trucks, ships, trains, they run on diesel. So when diesel consumption is down, there's only one reason. Nobody's placing any orders. So right. Diesel consumption is pretty insensitive to price. So, when the price of gasoline or the price of oil was $100 a barrel, didn't make any difference at all to diesel consumption because people were placing orders and they just passed the extra cost on to their consumers. Well, diesel consumption is down like 30%. Okay.
As of right now?
As of right now.
Okay.
And so, you look at total oil consumption versus gross domestic product, and that is about as straight a line as you're ever going to find in the statistical world. And we can argue and discuss why that is, but it just is.
So diesel usage and nominal GDP?
Oil consumption, refined product consumption, and GDP, yes. Okay, so if you believe me, and diesel is the barometer of the economy, and it's down 30%, then you can guess that economic contraction is probably some reasonable fraction of, in this case, 30%.
Right.
And so, and you hear all the, GDP might be down 4 or 5% this year, says the World Bank or the Fed or whatever. But then you read between those lines and you actually look at what, a Fed chair like Kaplan is saying. And he's saying, well, actually economic contraction is 24% or 25%. So, which is it, man?
Right.
I'm not saying that GDP will be down 30%. I'm just saying that if you want to have some kind of some sort of a good measure of where we're going, don't look at gasoline, look at diesel. Look at gasoline and it ain't great, okay? The other thing I have is that if we're talking about recovery, recovery isn't a percent from 0 to 100. Recovery is how far have we come from where we were to where we want to be. And so somebody says, well, okay, we're back, or, my investment manager says, well, you're only down 4% this year. Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. I'm at 96% of where I was, a year ago. Well, how far down were we in March? Oh,
Right.
shoot. Well, we were down 30%. Okay, so 30% down compared to where we ought to be. Let's just say it's 100%. How's that going for us? Oh, well, you're only, so by that measure, you're only 80% of where you need to be instead of 96%. Oh, so we're doing better, but we're actually not doing great, right? Right. And
Yeah.
so that's the way we need to measure all of this stuff. And people seem to have a hard time understanding that. It's like the math is too complicated for them. But that's the way I do it. And when you do it that way, what's happened by any measure is that oil consumption recovery has stalled. It
How
went
does
way up and now it's just riding along flat. We're not recovering any further.
how does this compare as far as the numbers with diesel usage to 2008, the GFC?
Oh, it's much worse. Much worse. So if you look at any given month, even the worst month or the worst quarter after 2008 was not nearly as bad as like the average of 2 or 3 quarters. And that's another good point, and I'm glad you brought it up, that if you graph um, uh, kind of year over year consumption or quarter over quarter, and you look at 2008, 2009, it took 5 years before consumption recovered
Wow.
back to what it was, before the crash. And so all of a sudden now we got all these talking heads who were telling us, oh yeah, everything's going to be great. We're going right back to normal by, the end of 2020 or the middle of 2021. And the question that I asked them is, do you guys pay any attention to history at all? I mean, history is not ever going to be like it was the last time, but that's probably not a bad guide. And
But
if it took
it's going to
five
run, right?
years to come back after 2008, 2009, tell me why I should expect that it's going to come back any sooner or much sooner than then when I can show you that everything about now is worse than that. Oh, well, we didn't think about that.
Based on your expertise, is there an argument for, let's say we're down 30% now, and I don't know what it was in the GFC. Let's just say it was 15%. And it took us 6 years to get that 15% of demand back, let's say. So is there a case for it might even take longer to get the demand back this time because we've gone down further?
Yeah, that's certainly possible. The other way I would look at it, George, is why did we end up where we did after the great financial crisis?
Okay.
What was the problem that got us there? And I mean, another way to put that is we solved the great financial crisis, which the origin of which, in my opinion, was debt. We solved it with more debt.
All right.
Okay, so what's the likelihood that Band-Aid's going to hold? Well, zero. And so the next way to think about this is how much of what's going on right now is because of a virus and how much of it is simply what was going to happen anyway and the virus accelerated. And
Because of
that's my
excessive debt.
yeah, that's my view, that everything that's going on right now was inevitably going to happen more slowly over the next 5 or 10 or whatever the time range was. And COVID came in and it was an accelerant. It just, made it happen super, super fast.
Yeah.
And so, and people love to say, oh, Art, I agree with everything you say because all your arguments are so logical and so data driven. But look, the difference between you and me is that I'm an optimist and you're a pessimist. People actually tell me that. It's like, wow. Okay, so you agree with everything, but you think it's going to work out better than the data suggests that it will. And my point is, I'm not a pessimist either. I'm a scientist. I have my own opinions and feelings about things, but when I talk about this stuff, I mean, believe me, I would like to be optimistic if the data allowed me to be optimistic, but But my sense is that we get rid of this virus. Let's say we completely get rid of it. Let's say it's gone from planet Earth by December 31st of this year, which of course it won't be. I say, the economy is toast for a long time to come because we still haven't solved any of the structural problems that got us into the GFC and that got us into this. And again, that's not pessimistic. That's just fact.